We are back on Morning Line. Thanks for joining us. Our guest this morning is Metro Vice Mayor Jim Shulman, talking about the property tax increase, which passed 34%, not cents, 34%. Hey, listen, before we get to that, I just wanted to mention this. You and I have talked in the past about Reverend Enoch Fuzz, who is battling lung cancer. And I'm going to see him, by the way, later today, Jim, but it's a tough road to hoe, sometimes these cancer treatments. But I wanted to mention someone else I think you are familiar with, and he's been a friend of mine for years, and just an incredibly respected man in this community. But Professor Revis Mitchell from Fisk University passed away. Yeah. And I don't know if you had heard that or not. He, I believe, had been battling cancer too, according to his family. And just wanted to make mention of it. Just an amazing man who had an incredible sense of history, going back to the sit-ins in Nashville, knowing about the civil rights movement then, and with a lot of things happening now. What was neat about him is that he was able to discuss these very volatile topics sometimes with other people who would get emotional, and he was calm, and he is a decent person. And when he talked, you listened, and he also fostered, I think, conversation among people to try to reach resolutions and bringing people together. And someone like him is going to really be missed, especially right now.
Well, Nick, you think about what this country looks like right now, and it's gone back for a while, that level of animosity between whether you're Democrats or Republicans or you're liberal or conservative, that the art of bringing people together, of just talking through things, it's like a lost art. We're so much better, not that we have to agree all the time, but we're so much better when we can sit down and kind of work it out. And we don't do that anymore.
Right.
And that's, I get really frustrated with what happens in Washington. It's like, and maybe it has to do a lot with maybe the pandemic is a situation. It's like, this is something where you would think something that's out there that is seriously hurting us and killing us would bring us together, and we all start working together. But it just seems like we fight more than we used to, and then we get all upset, and then the sense of seeing people having rallies where they come together is great. The question is, because we're switching back to that topic, it's like, okay, how do we start making change? How do we bring people together? And when you find people that are so far on the other extreme, how do you start bringing people back together? So it's like, you know what? We can actually fix some of this stuff. So. Yeah. I think that's part of the responsibility. Again, we were talking about the budget and passing it. Our work continues on, and I don't think you can stop. I think it's the responsibility, and I'm not talking about the city council. I'm talking about state legislature. I'm talking about national government. There's an issue going on. There are. I mean, we always have issues going on. There's an issue going on that we should be having frank, open discussions with. One of the things I love about Pastor Fuzz, besides he's just such a really sweet person, is that he does bring people together, and he does make people talk, and he does try to come up with ideas. Maybe if we all sat down and tried to emulate Pastor Fuzz, not in all ways, but overall, we'd be better off.
Oh, I agree. And that's what Revis Mitchell did as well. I mean, calm heads and reasonable conversation makes all the difference. Well, let's go to someone who has a calm head, and that would be one of our regular followers, Joe. Joe, good morning. Hi, Joe. What's on your mind?
Just a comment about the first comment I'm going to give is about the guy, the professor you had on there.
Yeah.
I didn't agree with very little about what he said, but I would agree with one thing. Body cameras is going to be one of the biggest wastes that they've ever done. If you've ever looked at any body camera footage, it's like if you had a cameraman out there filming you on this program, and there was about 4 or 5 people bumping into him all the time. You're looking at the ceiling, the floor, the walls. That's the only time they're good is when you're stationary and to get a good picture. And as far as cutting the police department, the number of policemen, when you got people that won't even obey an armed policeman, what does he think community policing is going to do. But I'll get off of that and get on Metro. Metro services have been suffering for some time now. You can't get anything done. And the council and the mayors, not particularly this ones, but the last few years, if they ran a business, the business would be bankrupt in no time short because they waste a lot of money. And I guarantee you, probably a big portion of people that work in Nashville make their money here, got their jobs here. They don't live in Davidson County. So, this is how we wound up in the position we're in. And the sad part about it, it's going to fall back down on the average person that lives in Davidson County that's trying to get by and make a living. And they're going to wind up having to pay for these other people's mistakes.
Yeah, a bunch of that. Now, listen, we touched on some of that, but I wanted to go with one of his earlier comments to get your take on it, Jim, with regard to the body cameras. You heard the interview we had with the professor out of Brooklyn, and he says that, the research that's coming in now, and we understand initially why there was a call here in Metro for police body cameras, but he's even saying, the BLM group is saying that it doesn't make that much of a difference with regard to police, violence. And the truth is, there are a lot of other cities that have these police cameras. Yeah. And while it may get video for you, it doesn't seem like it reduced the number of, excessive force cases. I wonder what your thoughts are. From the very beginning, I had some real questions about the costs involved with police cameras and whether or not that money could be better spent, especially when in this day and age, video's just about everywhere anyway. And thank goodness for the video. But even in the case, these most recent cases, the video is all after the fact. It's not preventing the killing, okay? I mean, George Floyd, we had the video after the fact. The video, I want something that's going to stop these things from happening beforehand, not afterwards we get to see it and prosecute the people for doing it.
Nick, I'm sitting here thinking about all this, and I was thinking about, here we go, we're heading towards body cameras, and people think, yeah, that's what we should do. And then you've got other people going like, there's evidence that maybe it doesn't work as well. Mm-hmm. Nashville, despite, what we used to think, Nashville is a major United States city.
Yes.
We may not be as big as New York or Chicago, but we're growing very quickly. We have big city issues. We have contacts in other cities. You would think that with all the different cities around this country, there should be some innovative leaders that are trying different things in different places and watching the results. One of the problems is that we just follow along and do stuff, and then people have become so tainted with everything. They go, well, they're just making up the results to say that what they did was the right thing. I'm not sure why we're not all gathering together, and maybe there are groups that do it, but the leaders of the big cities, other groups sitting down and going, you know what, let's talk about innovative practices and let's figure out what seems to be working in different places. And then, maybe something that works in Pittsburgh doesn't work here. I get that, but we're never going to fix anything if we just don't do anything. Oh, it's time to do stuff. It's time to look at it. But what I would also caution is, two things. One is you got to have an open mind. You can't just go into it and say it's not going to work. You have to think through it and see if it does. The second thing is, you've got to be willing to make that, to try, and then you got to watch it and see if it works. You got to use the data. You just got to look at realistic situations and see if it works. Mm-hmm. If it doesn't work, back up and try something else.
Yep.
But you got to try. You got to keep working at it.
No one's going to quit, that's for sure. I mean, we can't. Let's go to Doug. Doug, good morning. What's your question or comment, Doug?
Hey, I'm going to expound a little bit on what your earlier caller, Joe, was talking about. You've got so many people that live in the surrounding counties that work in Nashville and absolutely pay nothing for the use of our infrastructure. You have visitors and tourists that come here, and there's extra taxes on their hotel bills and whatever they do that covers the use of maybe our police, our ambulances and fire protection, our sewers, everything. And the people here that live in Davidson County pay the property tax, and the expanded property tax. But yet you have people who live in the nice surrounding counties that don't have to worry about all this high property tax, come in here, work their jobs, and take their money back out of the county. So why wouldn't we consider, say, a occupational privilege tax that if you don't live in Davidson County, you would pay maybe 1 or 2%, which is not a whole lot when you're talking about some of these jobs, that would help pay for the infrastructure and the upkeep of Davidson County.
That's interesting. Thank you for your call. I mean, when he was saying that, I didn't know where he was going to go, and he suggested a little tax there. I was going to say, how about toll roads? Now, of course, not everyone passing through Nashville is stopping and working here, but you know how a lot of cities, there's a toll to get across the bridge, and and that makes a bunch of money for them when you do that on cars. But has that ever been suggested or considered in the time you've been involved in city government, Jim, with regard to taxing somehow individuals that don't live in the city but work here?
I know it's been talked about. I'm not sure about a particular one that he was talking about. But I know it's been looked at. Remember, I mean, it hadn't been that long ago when we were talking about the transit proposal. And if you remember, the selling point on it was, we're not going to pay for it. We're going to be, the people who are paying for it are all the people who live outside of the county because they come in and use sales tax, and that's what's going to get it. Obviously, we never got that far, so we never knew if that was going to work or not. I think you keep looking at it. One of the problems, Nick, and this goes with everything else we do. I mean, I look back over the last 3 months, we've been really, really just swamped with stuff because of the pandemic and everything else that's going on. But it would really be helpful to bring in, and I know that they're out there, and I certainly am not saying, okay, just go spend a lot of money and find these innovative thinkers. But what you're looking for are people who are kind of think outside the box, who say, okay, why are we doing this? And I'll tell you, Nick, what's also so interesting, I've just learned, maybe it's because I'm getting older, but you kind of throw out ideas. It's like, you're listening to people talk about something. It's like, why don't you just do it this way? And people go, we never thought about it. It's like, what do you mean you never thought? It was just so obvious. It's really hard to get people to think outside the box. Mm-hmm. And so what Doug is talking about, think outside the box. Now, I'm not sure what works. One of the things that we can't do, like, there was a discussion last night about impact fees, certain things that we can do in Davidson County and certain things we can't do. A lot of it depends on what the legislature grants us the authority to do. But it doesn't mean that we can't keep coming up with maybe possible ideas and working with the legislature to come up with something that works.
Toll road. Let's get toll roads.
I've heard people hate toll roads.
I know, I hate them. I never have the change. Let's go to Emmy. Is it Emmy Joe? On line 2?
Yes.
Hey, go ahead, sir.
Hey, I just on the body cams that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
As I understood it, when the George Floyd thing was happening, there was actually a dispatcher watching the live feed and commenting on it to her supervisor, saying something like, I don't want to be a snitch or whatever. Is that something that's available? I mean, is that something that that you could have a third party looking in on the police activity as it's happening and being able to comment on it or, give third hand?
Mm-hmm. Kind of like supervising, you have a supervisor maybe watching as officers with cameras go into whatever situation and can kind of monitor and give commands from there if things change?
Correct. I mean, it just seemed to me like, there was other people involved other than just the officer with, his knee on the guy's neck.
Okay. And I'm not entirely clear on what video entirely is set in that criminal case, but Do you happen to know, my understanding in Metro is the police cameras are such that they record, but then it has to be downloaded. I don't know, I don't believe it's sent by Wi-Fi or what that is back to a place where, you know, a sergeant could be supervising and witnessing what's happening. Are you familiar with that?
No, I know that the DA's office did a big study on body cams, and it was going to be a lot more expensive because they had to look at it all and then you know, figure out what they were going to use, and then the public defender's office would be involved, and they might have to take different things. You know, if there were people in there that shouldn't, you know, you didn't want to show their faces, how do you deal with that? But technology is getting better.
Sure.
So, but some of it, Nick, I mean, you know, we talk about the George Floyd incident. You had 3 police officers standing right around there, and so I talked to some younger people the other day, and they're going like, why didn't somebody just push them off? I mean, I think we've all had that discussion. I mean,
right.
Somebody, if you talk to police officers in Nashville, they say improper technique, you don't do that, that is not how you do it. But, you know, it's that peer pressure thing. I mean, somebody, your supervisor may be doing it. When do you just push them off?
Well, oh, you mean one of the other officers that was saying? You're right. I mean,
when
but
does the officer
you know, who had the knee on his neck was
right.
the authority figure in that, and a couple of the others were rookies, and
That's
then
right.
the other. But you also wonder about the citizens watching, and there's a very easy explanation for that. You see a police action going down, something like that. You intervene, you might get shot, okay? Because it's a very volatile situation. Retrospect, you wish someone had. You would have been arrested on the spot if you weren't shot, and you would be taken away and have to answer for it. You would have saved the man's life, but you don't know that at the time. But you know, it made me think, his call as we go to the break, about the video when U.S. forces, SEAL Team 6, went in to get, you know, bin Laden. Mm-hmm. You know, there was video on them that was being watched by the president and others. Right. You know, I mean, that kind of technology definitely exists. Now, can you have a sergeant supervising the cameras for every single officer in the field? No, I mean, that's not realistic, but I see where he's going on that, and with technology, things will improve. You certainly could do it if you knew someone was going into a very dangerous situation, so someone could monitor that kind of stuff. Right. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll take a few more phone calls in our final segment with Metro Vice Mayor Jim Shulman.